find out how to create a virtual reality strategy at your station. So, now, here to introduce these experts is our moderator, Chris Malamo, Manager of Virtual Design Group at Ross Video. Chris.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. We have a great expert panel that I'd like to introduce, and I guess I'll call you guys up one at a time. So we have Mac McLaughlin from FX Design. Who made it won many Promax awards. We have Jim Doyle from Ross Video. He's Director of Creative Services. Andy Tarabacchia from CNBC. Gideon Ferber from Ross Video. He's the Director of Ross Virtual Solutions. And last and certainly not least, we have Bjorn Myres, who came all the way from Norway to join us here. He's from Myres Design, an amazing designer for everything virtual. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you joining us. We've been wanting to talk about virtual at Promax for some time, and this is a great opportunity to do that. I'm manager for Ross Video of the Virtual Design Group. I've been involved in virtual projects for about 20 years. Admittedly, 20 years ago when I was doing my first project, I thought that we wouldn't be using hard sets anymore by now. And as you all know, it's been taking some time to adapt. So this discussion is about where we are with the technology and how the Unreal Game Engine is leading us to that photorealism that we've been looking for. So with that, we'll get started. Steve. So we wanted to start, we all like data, and we wanted to start with Mac giving a presentation on that supports why virtual can work in broadcast and why your clients, your consumers would appreciate virtual. So with that, I will leave this to you.
Like Chris said, virtual's been around for 20 or so years, but about 10 years ago at NAB, we started noticing everybody was pushing virtual in their trade show booths. And so as a set designer, mostly doing hard sets at the time, we wanted to know, was it something we really needed to be concerned with? And if so, did we need to get in front of it, and what would work and what would not? And we had done several research projects with MAG, and so we're going to share with you just a little snippet, because I know you guys love audience research. We're going to share with you just a little snippet from that Marv Danielski and I presented at NAB back in 2012. So this is 7 years old information, but I think if you see what the people saw at that time 7 years ago, and now you see what we're going to show you today that Unreal can do, you'd say, wow, if that was working then for the audience, why can't it work today? So let's go on to move on, so go ahead. Sure. So one of the things that we did a research project in 2008 and again in 2012 is why do people watch a news broadcast? Why they pick a particular channel? And you guys probably all know this, being accurate and reliable, being believable, trustworthy, knowledgeable about local area, warm and friendly, and there are several others. At the very bottom of that was sets. They still cared. I'm not even going to show you that slide, but they still cared. But what we targeted in our research was believability and trustworthiness, and how the set would or could impact that. So let's go on. So we did a virtual set and a real set. The real set I'm going to show you is one we did for KPIX about 10 years ago. It's still kind of contemporary. It's still on air now. It had the very first 55-inch large format video wall, the first one to come over. And the virtual set we're going to show you is from ITV. In London, it was designed by Lightwell, and I think it was done on the Viz engine, I'm not sure. So we'll show you two videos, and you'll see the trace lines that the viewers, they did it online trace, and you'll see how they compared, and I'll give you some statistics from that. So go ahead and run it first. So you watch the trace line, it goes up pretty quickly, and so that's a 55-inch video wall behind, which is now standard. This was about 10 years ago, but almost every set has that now. And the trace line gets up pretty high. All right, go ahead on to the next video. This is ITV. We can all tell this is not a real set, right? It's mostly a graphical set, but it was running as a virtual set at the time. Trace lines climbs. It gets almost to the same level, but not quite as quickly. All right, let's move on. Overall, They preferred the real anchor set, 48% to 41%. Great, we designed that. Next, on these attributes, the real set also won personality most engaged, most attractive, again, thank you, and more realistic. So they knew that the real set was real. 32% weren't sure that the fake set was fake, but overall they knew which one was real, right? The virtual set was preferred on one attribute, which was the clearest graphical information. Even though we had the big video wall behind them, they preferred the big graphical background to the real video wall. Interesting. And here's the one that at the very bottom here, the third one down, which was the most believable and trustworthy for your anchors, and the virtual set actually won by a small percentage. So they knew the set wasn't real. They didn't necessarily, the design didn't upset them, but they liked the real set better, but they still believed and trusted the anchors. Now they were British and had accents, so it could have been it, but so to us it said, okay, the audience is okay with this. We were still hearing from news directors, general managers at the time that it looks too cartoony, the anchors won't be comfortable, they're not going to believe us, and now if it were Donald Trump, it'd be fake news. But we thought, okay, we need to jump on this bandwagon and get ahead of it, so we started working with Ross and Viz and Hybrid on virtual sets, and that was now almost 8 years ago, and I think we've done a handful of virtual sets around the country in that amount of time. All right, moving on. So these are the things we just talked about, and then last I'd like to just show you Jim and Marv did the research, and this is a little snippet we're going to show next of, we've been working in Unreal now for about a year, and we use it as a tool to sell our real sets, our hard sets, because it's so much easier to render in, it's so much faster. The snippet you're going to see took 1 minute to render out, if you want to go ahead and run that. And we've actually designed this to be a real set, not a virtual set. We've since spent additional time on the materials, and actually Unreal just released a new update that will enhance this even more. So we think that every station should have, if not, I don't think a full virtual set, but at least a virtual area. We think it will not save you money. It will cost about the same as a real set, the same size, but it will make you money over time. You'll be able to use it for sports, entertainment, elections. When they want to come in and sell a program, you don't have to put it on your news set. You can put it on a virtual set, and we really think it will be the future, and that Unreal will move that forward. And you know, we build hard sets. We make money on hard sets. I still think you should have this. All right.
All right, thank you, Matt. I just wanted to say that if you guys have any questions, we'd love to answer them, but we're gonna go through and get each of our panelists at a time to show some stuff, and then we'll pick up questions at the end. So thanks again. Next is Jim Doyle. He's the Director of Creative Services for Ross Video. He leads the group that's been doing Sunday Night Football for NBC for the past 5 seasons, injecting augmented reality into their broadcasts. And we want to get Jim's opinion on what they've been doing in the sports space and how they think Unreal is going to help them going forward.
So go ahead and advance it. Go to the next one. All right. So we have a division within our creative services group. We call it RSVP, Rocket Surgery Virtual Productions. This group has been producing virtual for Sunday Night Football for the last 5 seasons. What we do is we actually design and integrate virtual augmented reality for various live events. We staff the events and actually run the virtual show, so we don't just operate solely as a creative services group, we actually are a production group. Our biggest, of course, is NBC Sports for Sunday and Thursday Night Football. We also do the Winter Classic every year for NBC. Recently, Fortnite World Championships, esports is starting to really get interested in what we can do in the virtual space. And then I want to sort of end things on what we did for the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 52, year before last, where we actually introduced Unreal into the broadcast. So to begin that, let's sort of show a little bit about what we currently do. Sort We've been working very closely with the NBC Sports design team to implement these designs and bring them to air. And as you can see, everything that you saw there was done on our Expression render engine. So it's a real-time 3D render engine, but it's not Unreal. And you know, given that it's still a very advanced render engine, there are some things that you can't do within that environment. Talking with the NBC production crew just prior to Super Bowl 52, they really wanted to bring what they call volumetric AR in. In other words, they wanted to take the players, and instead of having a still photograph of them, they wanted them to have depth and to move. So instead of having a 30-foot picture of a player, they wanted to have an actual 30 or 40-foot player on the field. So we went about and did some testing. And basically the way you accomplish this is that you scan the players in, and then you have to add the rigging to them. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this video will show you what that looks like. On the left, you can see the players being scanned in. On the right was the test video that we showed to NBC Sports to show them what was capable within the Unreal environment. So you can see that you can add motion capture to the players. They can actually, you know, move around and do things, and they're not still photographed. As you move around, and they have depth. And here's how this plays.
That's what champions are made of. Yeah.
Hey folks, come on in out of the cold and the U.S. Bank Stadium in downtown Minneapolis. Philadelphia taking on New England as we get set for Super Bowl break. First Super Bowl, both teams each gained 300 or more yards in the first half. Second quarter, Al Michaels, Chris Collins, Ron Michelle Tafoya there. Are your stats?
Good stuff. So, yeah, so go ahead and go to the next slide, thank you. So some of the takeaways on the Unreal Engine. We were able to do volumetric character scanning. We were able to advance 3D animation using and applying mocap data, so you can apply that motion capture to a lot of things. I could have those guys doing backflips. Whatever I want, whatever mocap I can get, I can apply to the characters. Also with Unreal, you get advanced physics and particle effects, so that you can really, the environment will never necessarily look the same twice when you air it. I also get advanced lens flares and atmospherics to add depth, and then real-time lighting and shadows. All of this adds up to a more realistic looking experience. Now keep in mind, on that particular production, we had about 3 days to turn that out. We were able to scan Tom Brady and the rest of the players on Monday, Tuesday. By Thursday, we were in fax, and then of course by Sunday we were on the air. So it was a very, very aggressive schedule for something like that. But we managed to pull it off, and the NBC Sports team was very happy.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. So next up is Andy Terry-Bacchia. He's been with CNBC for 10 years, and he's been in the trenches using real-time data with augmented reality for CNBC for some time. So I know they're currently not using the Unreal game engine, but he's been looking to that, and wanted to ask him about his time in the trenches, what he's been doing, and what he thinks Unreal is going to be helping or lending to his broadcast.
Sure, thank you, Chris. Yeah, we've been looking at Unreal for quite some time, and we can never kind of come across on figuring out how we can bring it into our normal operations on a daily basis. We are all about data. Our numbers mean everything to us, so that's the most important part. We go through a rigorous QA process when we are building templates, full screens, everything that you can think of. The graphics that we build from a real-time standpoint are about 90% of the screen. So you could just imagine what that QA process is like, and trying to make sure that all the data that we're getting from the exchanges is rendering and running in real time. So with that said, on the virtual side, like Chris said, we've been doing this for over 10 years from a virtual and augmented side. It's interesting to see how much it's grown. I'm kind of in the same boat with Chris, where when I was doing this about 15 years ago, I was thinking, wow, we should be, virtual sets are going to take over everything, and that's not necessarily the case. A lot of our directors and producers, they like the actual mix between reality and virtual or augmented. They feel like it tells a better story. They feel like it can tell a better story, but it also looks better from a viewer standpoint. It makes sense to the eye. So with that said, we can just show the video real quick, and then we'll go back to talking about this stuff.
Here we go.
Welcome to the exchange, everybody. I'm Kelly Evans, and here's what's happening as the second half of the training session gets underway. Down to you with the numbers. What you got, Dolly?
I want to focus specifically on technology, which is sitting near its own record high set right now. So if you look at technology intraday,
You see everything behind me, everyone? Now look, it's all gone. It's just this desk, and here we are again.
whoa, I gotta get out of the way. Coloring in the map of all the things that we knew in advance where they were gonna fall.
Facebook wants to use over 1.1 billion monthly users connecting, sharing, and playing. That's helping to drive that in-store delivery growth. But as far as those online grocery delivery numbers,
They are really, really scary. We do hope the administration, with all commodities, the dollar and the commodities are moving in a certain direction.
well, this is one of the biggest events of the year for biotech investors at SCO, the world's largest cancer research conference.
Next up, our shares of Netflix, which are moving a little bit here, the online video streaming production company.
So in this video, you can see that there's a lot of aspects where talent is integrated with the graphics, and that's kind of our number one goal. Our number one goal is obviously to tell the story, to be able to tell a better story, but it came down to us from the top down. How can we show graphics, but in a way that's just not a full screen? How can we interact, how can the talent kind of interact or be with the data? Producers, talent of course, directors, they like talent on air all the time. They don't like cutting away to a full screen and then cutting back. It kind of, for us, we felt like it may it may interrupt the information that we're trying to achieve. So in that first clip that right in the beginning you saw with Kelly, with those virtual panels that kind of came out and they were rotating. That's kind of our version of a modern day OTS, if you will. And that's kind of the goal and what we're kind of trying to achieve with virtual and AR technology right now. And it's come a long way. So right now we are all about having something templated. If it's not templated, it's hard for us to use because we are live 15 hours a day. So we don't have the time in breaking news. We don't have the time to say, okay, we're going to work on this graphic and build it, and then do all the augmented reality and virtual stuff that we have time to do. So that's kind of where we are at. We're really looking hard at the Unreal Engine and seeing what it can do for us. Again, it's all about the data. It's all about the numbers for us. And right now it's an exciting time. So the technology is taking off, and we're happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Andy. Next is Gideon Ferber. So he heads up Ross Video's virtual department. And this is a good segue into what Andy was just talking about. So we're talking about the Unreal Game Engine, and why are we? It's because it seems that everyone is going to be using or leveraging the Unreal Game Engine for virtual going forward. So if that's the case, if all the vendors who create render engines for virtual are using the same engine, what are the differentiators that you're looking for then to do your broadcast?
Cool, so thank you for the prep, that was perfect. The way I see it, and I'll get to your question in a second. The way I see it, the virtual graphic market changed in the last 2-3 years, 180 degrees. If up until very recently the discussion was about the graphic features, and one platform can do better particles, and then a second one can do better textures, and that's no longer the discussion. The minute we move to Unreal, it's a level playing field. Everyone gets the same set of features. So if we're talking about real-time reflections, everyone can do real-time reflections. If we're talking about dynamic shadows, every platform can do dynamic shadows. So the question or the discussion, the narrative changes. So now the question is less about the graphic capabilities. It's more about, well, it's awesome, but how do you actually use them? And I think that that's the core differentiation between the different platforms out there. If you think about it, the question is, so who does what, right? So if you have an Unreal Engine and it's an amazing platform and it gives you amazing tools, absolutely brilliant tools, but if now I have to rebuild my entire pipeline in the station because, well, I need now to implement Unreal, then you gain nothing. You're actually generating more cost for yourself and more training time and more downtime before you can actually go on air. So the way we see it in Ross, it's a little bit different. So we are focusing our efforts on the actual pipeline and the workflow. So designers should be able to focus on design, and yeah, you can see in the background some of our productions with our technology was involved in. Obviously the Weather Channel, well, pretty awesome stuff, all in Unreal. But again, so the question is who does what? So if the operators need to know Unreal now because you want to leverage the power of the engine, or the operators can just, well, operate the same way that they do with their CG platform. Who's dealing with the chroma key? Do we need now to train our light directors on Unreal because I need them to tweak chroma key values? That to us doesn't really make sense. So we are trying to maintain the same pipeline, or the traditional broadcast pipeline, the way it used to be. And that's kind of our main focus.
Thanks, yeah, I think that's an important thing, is how are you going to do your current workflow, and how are you going to do that virtually? And I think that's been a stopping point for some people not wanting to make the leap in using virtual. So workflow is very important, but one of the most important things is creative. You can have the greatest tracking, keying, rendering in the world, greatest workflow, but if you don't have great creative supporting it, that's all you're going to be judged by. So we're very happy to have Bjorn Myres join us. He's from myresdesigner.com. You should check it out. He has been pushing the envelope in design with virtual for years now. He's been using the Unreal Game Engine for 3+ years. And so I wanted to ask you, we have a reel that we want to show that we'll fire that up, but right after, you guys are going to see some amazing stuff, and it's so amazing that my question is going to be, if this is so cool now, where are we going in the future? So I'll leave it at that and play the video.
To be able to answer that question, you guys need to stay here for about 4 hours more. Is that fine? No flights or, yeah. No, I have to go back in time. I started with CG graphics, virtual graphics, when I was about 15 years old. And at that time, I was really mesmerized by it. Well, I mean, you could, in my eyes at that time, that was really cutting edge. But I had so many ideas and visions for what we should do. And I had so many clients that said like, hey, can you do this crazy virtual set? It needs to look real, it needs to have a lot of animation and a lot of functionality, but I have had one big enemy, and that was all the technology surrounding me. I'm kind of angry at my parents, because they could have waited like 10 or 15 years to get me. Because this device today have 10,000 more power or horses compared to the equipment I had back in the days. But a few years, I struggled for many years, like pushing boundaries, but I could never achieve my visions. But about 3 years ago, I met a crazy group of people in Ross that actually had connected Unreal Game Engine to their equipment together with a Norwegian startup. And I was like, oh, sorry. I'm from Norway. That's a nice word.
Means something totally different.
Yeah. I was just like totally bummed out because I entered. I was traveling 100 years into the future in 1 second, and suddenly I realized that my enemy before was technology. But now it flipped. My new enemy was now my own imagination. Because now I could actually do whatever I wanted to do. And in that way, we managed to push boundaries based on the fact that I've been stuck with something that I could use for so many years. So the future about, the reason I'm wearing sunglasses is because the future of broadcast and virtual is bright. My company have done like so many like opening titles, branding and that kind of stuff. But now my company is actually ending up being like a virtual engineer company, where we create new fields, where you can use real-time graphics in a way that you don't even would imagine you could use it, like within sports, within real-time commercials, within, of course, virtual sets, and the fact that now you can use amazing physical sets together with real-time virtual sets, and you don't know what's real or not. So there's endless of opportunities, and I think this just started today. And I see a lot of broadcasters in Europe and Asia and the Middle East are actually really digging into it. So I think that by adapting to this technology, you can be way more scalable, flexible, product placement in ways you never ever have seen it before. And of course, just having opening titles in real time would save me for a lot of time, and render time at least. Opening titles, idents, commercials, and so on. So the virtual future of broadcast is bright.
Thank you, Bjorn. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to take them. I got some questions for these guys I can fire off, but if anyone has any questions, please just let us know and we'll take them. Please. Oh, one second.
Are you guys currently working with any U.S. station groups with this kind of thing outside of the NBC, SNF, and all that?
That's a good question. Gideon, do you want to answer from a Ross perspective, or?
Sorry, need to turn it on. At the moment, we have few major customers, so obviously the Weather Channel. As you've seen, we are working with Turner, we're working with several universities, we're working with. So yeah.
And I guess I would caution that we're talking about the Unreal The
Yeah,
Unreal Engine,
yeah, yeah.
with, probably with Expression, we've had that in a lot of places, but it's not the Unreal Engine. But I think that adaptation, we think that adaptation is gonna be happening pretty soon.
Good afternoon, Victor, Nexstar, Brownsville, Texas. I have a group of friends of mine that we're just geeks about animation and all that. We try to burn the computer to the ground. You know, now with new Apple coming out with their model, you know, we just started laughing about the model, like the setup of the monitor. I'm like, what, you know? But the core value of that was like awesome, you know. But when watching the Weather Channel animation, not only did it bring the vision, but the audio to it, you know, and just the whole scale, and that was impressive, and that's something that is going to continue going into the next level, you know. It's amazing. But when developing that project, you know, I'm sure there were so many concepts out there before. I mean, so many ideas in the brief room. What steps did it take, you know, to finally launch that?
Well, I think it was it was a pretty long in development in building up to that. Gideon, you probably got that.
So it's kind of funny. This is the most common question that we receive about the Weather Channel. Their work process is about 6 to 8 weeks per explainer. Usually it's about a week to 2 to fine-tune the concept, write a script, do all the rounds, really purify it. And then it's about 6 weeks roughly to create the scene and the infographics and the animation and everything around it. And then it's another, usually a week of rehearsals until they're ready to go live.
Like the Jim Hensworth tornado one? That was awesome.
That was awesome. Agreed.
It was
Yes.
cool. And
Really cool.
we're going to see more and more of that. I mean, obviously the Weather Channel is doing some great things, and they're going to continue, but we can promise you that that's going to be in other places pretty soon. Yeah.
But overall, the work in Burnham was amazing, everyone.
But the cool thing about the Weather Channel was that you could use real-time graphics to tell stories, because that is something people haven't really seen before, like live on TV, real-time, it's happening there, which is quite amazing.
I just wanted to add to that. What's interesting about the Weather Channel is that what we found from a CNBC standpoint was, you know, they had the visual, right? You can visualize a tornado, you can visualize lightning bolts. Where we looked at it was, it's very difficult to visualize money and data. And it's a serious subject, right? You don't want to fool around with, you know, in that kind of discussion. So we have to look at it as in a perspective of how can we use, you know, leverage something like that and be able to tell a story with it. And that's the difficult part on our end, to see how can we visualize data, how can we visualize money, how can we visualize the markets. And a lot of things what we've been looking at, and as you saw in the video, you know, those are small stepping stones into what we're looking to achieve. But from our standpoint, you know, there was a shot in there that it showed a bear with markets down, right? So that's our visual side of saying, okay, here is a bear. Everyone knows on the market side, if you show a bear or a bull, the markets are either up or down. So that was a small stepping stone into what we're looking at from our standpoint, which is really difficult to try and visualize that side of it. So, and this is where where we're looking at the Unreal Engine, kind of pushing that and being able to think and achieve those goals that we want to get to, with being able to move the markets, if you will, or tell different stories.
I think earlier you mentioned something I think is important, is that you're not going to full screen graphic. You're not leaving your talent, which is really driving the show,
right,
and going to a full screen. So the same thing with weather now. You're not leaving that talent and going to a full screen. You're bringing the weather into the environment, and I think that that's going to be something that sticks.
Yeah, any research that we've done in the past has been, viewers always enjoyed seeing the talent on air and also incorporating them with the graphics. They kind of like that kind of combination of visual manner. It's more pleasing, I guess, if you will.
Sure, a question.
kind of a basic question, is how much does the camera and the programming of the cameras have to play in all of this? I mean, that seems like a whole other setup and knowledge base to get that functioning.
There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Doing virtual well is having really good tracking, keying, and rendering. So the tracking component could be robotic cameras, it could be a jib, it could be a flying rig. There's all kinds of ways to track cameras now. I guess I don't know if I'm specifically answering your question, but
Well, I know that when we were doing Sunday Night Football, I guess it was about midway through the season, actually of Thursday Night Football, our first season with that. We flew a spider cam rig at ESL event in Germany, and the producers for Sunday Night Football said, well, we'd really like to have that in football. And we had flown it with a completely different cable cam operation, whatever. I got a bunch of people on the phone said, we got to learn to deliver on Skycam very quickly. We got to do it in about about eight games. We had to hit the air, and we were able to deliver that. Prior to that, we had been getting tracking data just from a lens, what we call the end zone cameras, or cameras 13 and 14, to getting full tracking data from Skycam, and that was really a game changer for virtual in that space, and set a whole new standard for what we were able to do, what other people were striving to do.
If I can join as well. It's all about what you want to achieve in your show. It's all about your production. Forget about what technology can offer. Focus on your shots. What do your directors want to achieve as the final output? There are so many different tracking devices out there today that no matter what you have in mind, you will find the right package to accommodate that. Anywhere from mechanical encoders, as Chris said earlier, or image-based tracking, or infrared, or there are so many different companies that provide tracking today that you really shouldn't focus on which technology is better suited. Focus on the actual production. That's the best advice I can think of.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that is, coming from the television side, we always look at the story first and then the technology second. So we're all about being able to tell that story first and then figure out what technology we can bring in. And to answer your question a little bit further, we currently use NCAM as a tracking system, but we've used multiple tracking systems over the years, and they've just gotten better and so much easier to use. That process is secondary now. That used to be the first thing on everyone's mind, right? And now that's completely second. It's like, okay, we know it can do it. Now let's just figure out how we can best utilize it.
Hi there. The work is really extraordinary. Thanks for sharing it. I'm imagining the use of this in breaking news. I don't know if you've done any of that, maybe specifically for Andy, but how do you see that applying in a breaking news scenario? I mean, we've seen weather, and that's great, but have you explored that? Are you looking into that? I'm just interested.
Yeah, sure. That's actually a great question. It's just recent that we've just started discussing that. And from our standpoint, again, because we're about the markets, our breaking news is obviously happening every day. It all depends on when Trump is tweeting something, the markets are going to go up or it's going to go down, right? I mean, that's just so that's our news. But we look at it more of our big bang, our kind of tornadoes, if you will, are earnings. So because it's quarterly, we can kind of concentrate on that, and that can be kind of our big moment, right? Where we can say, okay, we can concentrate on something for a couple of weeks, build it nicely, build it the way we want it, be able to tell the story that surrounds earnings, and what drives that. So that's kind of the way we're looking at from a standpoint of breaking news. A lot of our stuff is, not a lot of it, all of it is templated, and it's really important for us. So we have to make sure as well, from a breaking news standpoint, that these graphics are going to make sense when we have to go to that breaking news. And that's why we kind of pinpoint it the way we want to. And we feel like earnings is kind of our big moment in being able to take advantage of a lot of this.
I think that touches on something we spoke about earlier, which is workflow. And for instance, a lot of stations are moving to automation. And so how
your journalists going to get their story in, and how is that going to come out as augmented reality or in the virtual world? So getting in touch
Yeah,
with that.
that's, I apologize in advance, I do a bit of self-promotion for Ross here. Just tiny bit. So this is, again, as I said, I mean, this is something that myself as a product manager, this is exactly what I'm focusing on. Because we no longer have to focus on the design features, on the graphic capabilities, because that just comes from Epic. Epic Games just keep delivering a new build pretty much every other week. We can really focus on the workflow and how to tie all the different pieces together. And that's something that we just introduced last NAB in April. We showed the complete MOS workflow for a newsroom system that goes directly into Unreal. So you can create, or you can templatize your workflow and let the journalist write whatever they want, and that will just populate automatically in Unreal. So your automation system can drive your rundown, the journalist can keep doing what they're supposed to do. And again, the Unreal is completely transparent in that process. It's just another engine under the hood.
One more question right here.
Hey guys, this is a little more open-ended. I was around when Unreal came out, like the video game came out, and the beginning of the engine. And at that time, there were so many different graphics engines, and there's still some other ones. But I'm seeing Unreal more and more on everything you see out there. What sets Unreal apart? What makes it such a big thing for you guys and what you do?
Can I please take the first answer? I had a drink with a couple of guys in, I had a dinner with some guys from Epic. And I said like, am I gonna pay for this? No, we're gonna use Fortnite money. And for me as a geek, I realized that, I mean, I've been using old engines, but I realized that, wow, they were clever, because they made the ecosystem that will fuel the engine. And Epic Games, they are so, I mean, they're really, really good at like fueling back to their engine in a way that nobody else can do today.
I would say there's a second part, or second answer to that question. For those of you that may not be aware, the engine's free. You just download it right off the internet and start using it.
One more thing. When we started developing Unreal for real time, we did a search, right? And the two main candidates were Unity and Epic, and the Unreal. And back then, the Unreal engine was better, just in terms of pure graphic quality. Textures, shaders, it was just better. By now, Unity is pretty much on the same level, but Unreal just make ridiculous amount of money. And they just throw money at everything, and that solves the problem. So, it's really easy. They just, for example, they just announced a couple of months ago that they are spending this year alone $100 million on awards for Fortnite events. Now, when you can do, stuff like that, the engine is secondary, it's nothing. So, yeah.
So when you're angry at your kids for playing Fortnite, just they're helping the broadcast.
Add one thing that they're continuously updating it, and I don't know if you know it's going to increase your productivity. Like I told you earlier, that one little snippet you saw took about a minute to render. If you realize your folks that are creating the graphics, creating things for you, how much time they spend watching the computer clunk through a render, it's going to speed up your productivity, I don't know, 1,000%, I would think. So that alone is a reason to go to it. And it's easy to learn. I mean, it didn't take art designers that long to get on board with it.
I have one last question right here.
Considering like you're already creating virtual like environments and 3D content, how do you see this playing out within like the actual, whether it be Oculus Rift or whichever VR like headsets, and just because I think we're always looking for what immersive kind of interactive experiences beyond the television screen that we can give to our audiences.
That's a great question, and the cool thing about Unreal is that you develop in Unreal, and it can be deployed to a variety of different platforms, including your phone and Oculus and things like that. One thing we talked about earlier was prevising, or Andy, when they are dropping AR into their studio, they model their studio and they previs that to sheet where to go, so they don't have to take up studio space. You guys are doing like 15 hours of live TV a day, so.
Yeah, and
so
it's great. That's a great question that you brought up, because it's something else we also looked at and tried to utilize, and it's actually a great tool. What we thought of was, we are live 15 hours a day, so it's very difficult for us to get into studio and test using the camera systems that we have. So we thought of an idea where we can use the Oculus or a HoloLens more specifically, and we rebuild our studios, and which we have done, and then we put the graphics within that area. So if we are doing an augmented reality segment or piece that we're building, we can bring in the directors and the producers, put on a HoloLens, have them look at the set as if they were actually there through the camera, and you can actually click and move pieces around, and you can say, the director can say, I don't want that here, I want this camera here, I want this piece here. And that's really helped us, over the time-wise, developing all these features.
All right, I think we've used our time. I don't know if we have a little bit more we can go, but if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them afterwards about any aspect, set building, sports, live data, workflow, and of course design. So.
And if you're not going to go to the Sam Jam tonight, you really want to dig into the research. We've got the entire 100-slide presentation. If you want to take that.
With funny British accents.
Yeah, British accents.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.